Thanks for tuning in to Operation Revenge. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin the story.
They didn't expect me to show up. That was obvious from the moment I walked through the doors of the Solvay atrium, where golden uplighting bounced off white linen and crystal glasses. The BIOTECH gala was in full swing, a celebration of Alden Holt's visionary leadership and his team's development of a breakthrough genetic therapy for muscular dystrophy. My name is MARIN HOLT. I'm 38. I live in Seattle, though I've spent most of my adult life in laboratories around the country, rarely staying still. I don't usually go to events like this, but when I saw the vague invite arrive 3 days ago, unsigned, no salutation, just a line at the bottom. You're welcome to attend, if you'd like. Something in me clicked. I went, not in an evening gown, but in my formal lab coat, starched, crisp, white. It wasn't a protest exactly, it was a reminder. The first thing I noticed inside were the brochures. Sleek, metallic paper, too thick to fold. I picked one up off a display table and stared at the cover. Alden Holt, Innovator of the Decade. Inside, pages of statistics, glowing charts, and photos of the team. In 2 of them, I saw the side of my face, blurred in one, cropped at the edge in another. No name, no citation. Like I was a technician who wandered into the frame. I didn't realize how tightly I was holding the brochure until it crinkled in my fist. People glanced at me as I moved through the crowd. A few whispered. One woman from a rival lab actually turned away mid-sentence, as if I'd said something rude just by existing there. Maybe I had. Maybe the insult was wearing a coat instead of a dress. My mother spotted me near the hors d'oeuvres table. She paused mid-laugh, her wine glass held aloft, her makeup sharp as ever. "Oh," she said, blinking. "You came." "You did send an invitation," I replied. "Did we?" Her brow furrowed slightly, like she was scanning memory files she'd outsourced long ago. "Well, good. It's good you're here." She didn't hug me, didn't offer a drink. She just turned back to the group and began another story. Later, I stood near the back wall as Alden took the stage. He looked the part, polished, calm, projecting sincerity like he was born with it. I recognized every slide he presented, the simulations, the viral vector algorithms, even the patient case studies, because I designed them. The crowd leaned in as he told the story of discovery, of sleepless nights and bold ideas. He spoke of his vision and his relentless pursuit of a cure. He even used one of my original phrases, a poetic one I'd written months ago in a briefing. "We don't rewrite the code of life. We listen for what it wants to become." The audience erupted in applause. I didn't. I stood in the shadows, my coat sleeve brushing the edge of the exit door, and felt the truth settle like dust inside my lungs. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an oversight. They erased me on purpose. And the first deletion happened years ago. I just hadn't realized it until now. The next morning, I sat in my Seattle loft with the curtains drawn tight and my laptop open, the glow of the screen cutting through the early gray. I hadn't slept. My inbox was flooded with headlines from biotech media. Alden Holt unveils breakthrough therapy, a new era in gene correction led by Holt Labs. Visionary or genius? Alden Holt is both. I clicked through each one, hoping to find even a footnote. I didn't. Then I opened the public release of the research dossier. It had just gone live on the council's database, the final, archived version of the therapy's development. I scrolled past the executive summary and saw the credits. Lead researcher, Dr. Alden Holt Clinical Direction, Dr. Neha Mystery Algorithm and Model Architecture, Holt Research Group, Original Design Contribution, NANA, I muttered out loud. My name wasn't just gone. It had been scrubbed entirely. I minimized the browser and pulled up my private archive. I'd kept everything. Every draft, every model, every test note. The files were protected behind 2 layers of encryption and a passphrase no one else knew. I went back to the earliest folders, opened the timeline logs, and started checking metadata. Timestamps, edits, user credentials. There. Right there. 4 months ago, someone had accessed the original therapy model files and overwritten my annotations. The core architecture I had spent a year perfecting was labeled under a different user now. A Holt admin. Not just the algorithm, but the CRISPR compatibility charts, the toxicity mitigation layers, the delivery protocols. It was all still mine. Only now, it wasn't. I went deeper, pulling the server root logs. I found a remote access tag buried in the upload string. The edits hadn't been made from the lab's internal network. They were done from a different IP address. One registered to a corporate device under Holt, Holt and Moore LLP, our father's law firm. For a second, I just sat there, my mouth dry. It wasn't just Alden. This had been coordinated, quiet, precise, executed through people who knew exactly how to make it look clean. My phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Hello? Marin? The voice was thin but sharp, like a whisper that still carried weight. It's Lillian. My grandmother. She never called me out of the blue. I saw the gala photos, she said. No pleasantries. Saw your coat in the corner. Knew what it meant. I didn't say anything. I told your mother once, she continued, that your silence was a strength. She took that literally. There was a pause. They used your silence like a scalpel, she said, to cut you out clean. Something in me cracked. Not all the way. Just enough to let in the heat. I have everything, I said quietly. The logs, the original work, even the edits. It's all here. Good, she said. Then it's time to stop being silent. She hung up without saying goodbye. I stared at the screen, hands still resting on the mouse pad. Then I opened a new folder, labeled it Proof, and started dragging files in, one by one. The next event was a closed-door BIOTECH Council conference. Alden had been invited again, naturally, to present his work on the gene therapy that had now made headlines for weeks. I hadn't been asked to attend, of course. They wouldn't have wanted someone like me in the room. Someone with the right to question everything. But this time, I wasn't going to wait for an invitation. I stood outside the grand hall of the Bellevue Convention Center, the giant glass doors reflecting the high-rise skyline in their sleek, transparent panes. I had my ID badge tucked into my coat pocket and my credentials on my phone. Everything in order. I was a registered member of the council, one of the original contributors to the research that had been rebranded as Alden's. I had the right to be there. I took a deep breath and approached the security desk. "Excuse me," I said, flashing my badge and offering a polite smile. "I'm here for the BIOTECH Council Conference, Dr. MARIN HOLT." The guard scanned my badge, then flicked his eyes down at the list on his tablet. His face was impassive, unreadable. He paused, looked again, and then slowly shook his head. "Dr. Holt, I'm afraid you're not listed on the guest list," he said, his voice flat. "I can't let you in." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart skipping. "I'm a part of the research. I'm one of the lead contributors." He glanced down again. "Sorry, ma'am. The list I have here doesn't show you as attending." I could feel the eyes of the other conference goers on me, the murmurs starting to swirl around as people in line took note of the exchange. "This is a mistake," I said, more forcefully now. "I need to get in. I'm Dr. MARIN HOLT, and I'm part of the team." The guard remained impassive, staring down at the screen. "I'm sorry, I can't let you in without clearance. You'll need to contact someone from the council to get this sorted out." I stared at him, then glanced at the crowd, half expecting Alden to be walking through the lobby, heading for the main stage, surrounded by the usual entourage. I needed to get in, but the more I tried to reason with the guard, the more I realized how pointless it was. And then, just as I felt a surge of frustration building up in my chest, I saw a familiar face, Lillian, my grandmother. She was walking across the lobby, wearing a tailored suit and looking like she owned the place, her steps swift and purposeful. She caught sight of me, smiled, and walked over. The moment she reached me, she slipped an arm around my shoulder. "Excuse us," she said to the security guard, her voice cool and commanding. "I'm Dr. Lillian Holt. She belongs here." The guard's eyes widened, and before he could say another word, Lillian guided me forward. "Let's go," she murmured, her voice low but unwavering. "Thank you," I said to her, my voice tight. "Don't thank me yet," she replied with a wry smile. "You've still got a room full of people to face." We walked through the doors, and the whispers started immediately. As I stepped into the hall, the buzz of conversations seemed to pause for a fraction of a second. People stared, a few exchanged looks, but no one said anything. I felt it, the subtle shift in the room, the quiet tension that followed me as I walked through the crowd, my footsteps echoing as I made my way to the seats near the back. I didn't want attention. I didn't want pity. I just wanted recognition. I found my seat, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, and stared at the stage. Alden's keynote was starting soon, and this time I wasn't going to let him speak without knowing I was there. The room was buzzing, the energy building as people filtered in. Alden's keynote was moments away, and the conference hall filled with the kind of quiet anticipation that only happens when the world's most powerful people are about to hear something groundbreaking. I sat at the back, as close to the stage as I could get without drawing too much attention. I could already hear murmurs from the people around me. "Is that MARIN HOLT?" one whispered. "She doesn't look like she's here to speak." I ignored them. I didn't need anyone to acknowledge me. I wasn't here for applause. I was here for one thing: proof. Alden walked in a few minutes later, as smooth and composed as ever, dressed in his signature sharp suit, his posture perfect, the picture of someone who'd already made his mark in the world. As he stepped up to the podium, the audience fell silent. The slides began, flickering onto the screen behind him. They were beautiful, seamless, polished. The first few slides highlighted the therapy's research and the breakthroughs in genetic therapy. Alden spoke of the early trials, the patient success stories, the incredible results. Then came the models, my simulations. The complex genetic algorithms that I had created, the simulations showing the therapy's precision, its efficacy, the charts that I had spent countless sleepless nights tweaking, adjusting, perfecting. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my breathing even. The data was mine, every pixel, every annotation. I had designed these models, yet here he was, presenting them as if they were his own. I kept my eyes fixed on the screen, determined not to look at him. Not yet. I needed to focus. I needed to see how far this deception would go. The slides flashed by, one after the other. Genetic vectors, CRISPR modifications, patient models. Everything was mine, down to the last slide that illustrated the breakthrough technology. And then, he spoke the words I had written months ago, the ones I had crafted for a scientific paper that never saw the light of day. The words about how life is not rewritten, but awakened. "A new chapter," Alden said, his voice rich with enthusiasm. "We don't rewrite the code of life. We simply listen for what it wants to become." The room applauded, but I didn't. I couldn't. It felt like nails on a chalkboard, hearing him say those words, my words, with such conviction, as if they were his own. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. But I stayed still. I made myself breathe. I had a plan, and I wasn't going to interrupt now. Not yet. Instead, I took notes. I scribbled down the references he made, the subtle changes to the data that hadn't been there in my original work, the slight misrepresentations, the minor tweaks. They were deliberate, designed to present him as the sole architect of this achievement. This was more than just theft. This was manipulation on a grand scale. Alden continued, unaware of the storm quietly brewing in the back row. He was too busy basking in the applause of the crowd, too absorbed in his own narrative to see the woman in the back who had just watched him steal her life's work. I filled my notebook with observations, evidence. I wasn't going to confront him now, not in front of everyone. But soon I would make sure the world knew exactly who had built this breakthrough. I just needed one more thing, one more piece of proof, and I had it. The final slide came up. It was my name, hidden beneath his. Just another footnote, barely visible beneath the glowing font of Alden Holt, Innovator of the Decade. I stood slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The applause thundered around me, but all I could hear was the sound of my own pulse. I didn't look at anyone. I didn't look at Alden. I walked out. I didn't need to stay for the applause. Not for him. Not for anyone. I knew what I had to do. The decision had settled into my chest, heavy and cold. It wasn't enough to sit back anymore, to let Alden and my family's silence swallow me whole. I needed to expose them for what they were. The next morning, I arranged a meeting with Dr. Halverson, the CEO of the Research Council. He was a man known for his quiet integrity, and if there was anyone I could trust to understand the weight of what had happened, it was him. I arrived early, standing in front of the sleek glass building, my reflection fragmented in the panes as I waited. The doors swished open, and I stepped inside, a rush of cold air from the air conditioning hitting my face. Dr. Halverson's office was exactly what I expected. Sparse, functional, polished. No distractions, no frills. A perfect place to discuss the kind of damage Alden had caused. He rose from behind his desk as I entered, offering me a steady, if somewhat curious, look. "Dr. Holt, thank you for coming in. Please, have a seat." I nodded and sat down across from him, setting my briefcase gently beside me. The weight of the files inside it felt more real than ever. This wasn't just about the work. This was about my family, about my brother. This was about the truth. "I've reviewed the dossier you sent over," Dr. Halverson said, flipping open a folder on his desk. "I have to admit, this is troubling." I leaned forward, heart pounding. "You saw it?" He nodded. "Everything you outlined matches up with the discrepancies we've been tracking. The edits, the metadata, the altered contributions, it's all in line with your report." His voice was careful but unwavering. "This isn't an isolated incident." I let out a breath. "Then you understand what I'm dealing with." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "I'm afraid this goes beyond Alden's actions, Dr. Holt. If your research was intentionally erased, if the entire contribution was manipulated, then we're looking at a systemic issue. It's not just about recognition, it's about integrity." "Trust," I nodded. That was exactly it. But there was one thing I needed more than anything right now: acknowledgement. I couldn't just have the work returned to me, the credit given back. I needed something more. "I'm not asking for a press release," I said, my voice steady. "I'm asking for this to be made right in the record, quietly but thoroughly. I want Alden's name corrected. Not for the applause, but for the truth. I want a public amendment. I don't need a show, just honesty." Dr. Halverson studied me for a moment, his fingers tapping thoughtfully against the folder. "And you're willing to let the board see all of this?" "Yes," I said. "I'm willing to let them see everything." He exhaled slowly, then nodded. "We'll make sure this is addressed, officially, with the corrections you've outlined." I stood, a sense of calm settling over me. "Thank you," I said, already feeling the weight of years of silence starting to lift. "I don't want the fanfare. I just want to be seen." Dr. Halverson stood as well, extending his hand. "Consider it done." As I walked out of the building, I felt the rush of something like victory, but it was too quiet to celebrate. This wasn't about winning. This was about righting a wrong, about taking back what had always been mine, and soon the world would know the truth. But first, Alden would have to face the consequences. And I was ready. The awards ceremony was broadcast live, and the excitement in the air felt almost tangible as the guests shuffled into their seats. It was the moment Alden had been waiting for. His name had been plastered on every billboard, every article, every press release in the biotech world. Innovator of the Decade, a title that was his, at least in the public eye. But I knew the truth, and soon everyone would too. I sat in the middle of the room, several rows back from the stage. I wasn't there for the spotlight. I wasn't there for the applause. I was there because I had made sure this moment would come, and now I was ready to watch it unfold. The truth had a way of catching up, no matter how many walls you tried to build around it. The live broadcast camera swept over the audience, capturing smiles, flashes of champagne glasses, and faces bathed in anticipation. The host made the usual introductions, building up the excitement as the final award of the evening approached. Alden had his hand on the podium, his fingers lightly brushing the surface, waiting for his moment. And then, the first slide of his keynote appeared behind him. His face was almost smug with pride as he started to speak, the familiar cadence of his rehearsed speech filling the room. "Thank you all for this incredible honor," Alden began, his voice smooth and authoritative. "When I started this journey, I never could have imagined the impact it would have. But I, did it. Together we created something that will change the world." The words were hollow to me, a rehearsed monologue to accompany his carefully curated image. But what happened next wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't something he had planned. A sudden flicker of light on the screen behind him interrupted his speech. The slide changed, catching him off guard. The crowd murmured in confusion. A new slide appeared, the title clear and bold: Dr. MARIN HOLT, Lead Innovator, Gene Therapy for Muscular Dystrophy. Alden faltered for just a fraction of a second, but that was all it took. I could see his smile slip, the flush of color rising in his neck. The murmurs in the room grew louder as the camera zoomed in on his face, capturing the discomfort that rippled through him. His eyes darted to the side, his gaze locking with mine for the briefest moment. But I didn't look away. I held his gaze, unwavering. The slide shifted again, showing images of the original research. My models, my notes, my algorithms. It was all there, laid out for the world to see, the data and the proof of my work, presented as if it had always belonged to me. The silence in the room grew thick. I could hear the rustling of papers, the uncomfortable shuffle of feet. A few whispers began, but Alden was trapped in the storm now. He couldn't hide behind his charisma or his glossy presentation. His stolen success was laid bare in front of him. Alden cleared his throat, his voice strained as he tried to recover. "There must be a mistake," he stammered. "This isn't part of the program." But the audience wasn't listening to him anymore. They were looking at the slide. They were looking at the truth. Dr. Halverson stood up from the side, taking the microphone from the host. His face was grim, but there was a sense of finality in his actions. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying across the auditorium, "there's been an error, and it's one that we take very seriously. Dr. MARIN HOLT, a core member of this project, has not been properly credited. We will be issuing a formal correction. Dr. Holt is the lead innovator of this gene therapy, and we apologize for the oversight." Alden's face turned a shade darker. I could see his hands trembling as he clutched the sides of the podium, his knuckles white. The room was quiet for a moment before an uncertain applause broke out. It wasn't enthusiastic. It wasn't celebratory. It was a confused, awkward attempt to fill the void of an uncomfortable truth. I remained seated, my expression calm, my hands folded in front of me. The truth had been spoken. No one could ignore it now. Alden stumbled through the remainder of his speech, but I wasn't listening anymore. I didn't need to hear him explain away what had been exposed. The lie had been revealed. And as I stood up to leave, the room parted like the sea, giving me space to walk out without a single word from anyone. They all knew. They all knew now. And that was enough. The green room was chaotic, buzzing with energy as the final session of the evening wound down. The air was thick with whispered conversations, the kind of murmurs that filled the silence when something big had just shifted. But even with all the noise around me, all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat in my ears. I'd done it. The truth was out. But now came the fallout. I stepped into the room where Alden was pacing, his face a mask of barely contained fury. My mother and father stood to the side, trying to offer him comfort, though it wasn't clear whether they were concerned for his image or for the damage to their family name. Evelyn, my mother, was speaking in hushed tones, but her words seemed to be falling on deaf ears. She hadn't once looked in my direction. Alden's eyes locked on me as I entered, and for a moment the entire room went still. The silence stretched longer than I expected. "Marin," Alden spat, stepping toward me. His voice was low, tight with barely contained rage. "What the hell was that? You just had to ruin everything, didn't you?" I didn't respond immediately. I simply let the tension between us stretch, watching as his anger began to bubble over. His eyes, usually so controlled, were wide with frustration. "You think this is about the recognition, don't you?" he continued, his voice rising. "This was my moment, Marin, my career. You've always been in the background, playing second fiddle, and now you think you can just steal it from me?" I remained calm. My hands were steady, my voice unwavering. "You stole it from me first," I said, each word deliberate. "This isn't about recognition. It's about taking credit for something that was never yours to take." Alden took a step forward, his jaw tight. He was trying to project dominance, but I didn't flinch. "You think you're the only one who worked hard," he sneered. "I've spent years building my reputation, getting people to trust me. I'm the one who's been out there, in front of the world, while you stayed in your lab, hiding behind your equations." I could feel my anger rising, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I took a deep breath and folded my arms across my chest, meeting his gaze head-on. "You think I hid? I wasn't hiding, Alden. I was building something real, something that mattered, and you took it." He clenched his fists, his whole body vibrating with rage. But before he could speak again, Lillian stepped into the conversation, her voice cool and measured. "That's enough, Alden," she said firmly, her eyes sharp. "This tantrum isn't helping anyone. Not you, not Marin, and certainly not this family." My mother, still standing in the corner, visibly stiffened, her eyes darting between the three of us. "Lillian, don't," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't the time or place." But Lillian wasn't backing down. She turned her gaze to my mother, her eyes unflinching. "You've been complicit in this, Evelyn. You both have. Marin has every right to be here, and every right to stand up for herself." Alden shot my grandmother a look, his face dark with disbelief. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice strained. "You're taking her side?" "I'm not taking sides, Alden," Lillian replied, her voice steady. I'm standing by the truth. It's time for you to do the same. I could see my parents' faces falter. For the first time, the facade of family unity cracked, and the reality of the situation started to sink in. My mother's face was a mix of shock and disbelief, while my father, silent as ever, just stared at the floor. I didn't wait for anyone else to speak. I'd had enough of the silence, the excuses, and the veiled threats. I'm done, I said, my voice finally breaking the tension. I don't need your apology, Alden. You can't undo what you've done. I've gathered everything I need. The evidence is clear. I'll take it from here. Alden stood there, stunned. His mouth opened and closed as though he were trying to form words, but nothing came out. It was as if he realized in that moment that this was beyond his control. Marin, please, my mother said softly, her voice tinged with desperation. Don't do this. But I was already walking toward the door, my hand on the handle. I'm not the one who's done this, Mom, I said, without turning around. But I'm the one who's going to make it right. With that, I left the room. The door shut quietly behind me, but the echoes of the confrontation lingered in the air. The battle had just begun, but I was no longer afraid. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about truth. And no one, not even Alden, could take that from me. A few days later, I found myself standing at a podium in front of a room full of scientists and business leaders, my hands steady as I gripped the microphone. The light was dim, the air cool, and the space was packed. The room buzzed with anticipation as I looked out at the sea of faces. Some familiar, some not. But they were all here for one reason. They were waiting to hear from Dr. Marin Holt. For so long, I had hidden behind the walls of the lab, tucked away from the limelight. I never needed the applause, the recognition. All I wanted was to do meaningful work. But now, standing at the forefront, the truth was mine to claim, and I wasn't going to hide anymore. I cleared my throat and adjusted the microphone, my fingers brushing against the cool metal. The audience fell silent. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, I began, my voice even, calm. I'm here to tell you something that's been left unsaid for far too long. I paused for a moment, watching the crowd. Their expectant eyes were locked on me, but I wasn't here to impress them. I was here to speak my truth. I am Dr. Marin Holt, I continued, my voice unwavering. I was the lead researcher on the therapy you've all been hearing about, the therapy that's been lauded as the next big breakthrough, the therapy that saved lives. A few heads turned. Some faces in the crowd shifted, brows furrowed in confusion. I could feel the weight of their curiosity, but I pressed on. What you don't know is that my name was erased from the record, I said, my gaze sweeping over the room. I didn't get the recognition, the credit, the acknowledgement. That wasn't an oversight. That was deliberate. The work that Alden Holt and others have paraded as their own is mine, and I'm here to correct that. There was a subtle shift in the room, whispers, some gasps, and more than a few confused glances. But I wasn't going to let their discomfort shake me. This was my moment. I'm not here for applause, I said, my tone firm. I'm not here to reclaim what was taken from me for pride's sake. I'm here because the truth matters. The work we do matters. The people who pour their hearts into their research, who devote their lives to making the world better. We deserve to be seen. For what we've done, for what we've created. A wave of silence rippled through the crowd, thick with realization. I could see some people nodding, their eyes starting to reflect a kind of understanding. This wasn't about egos. This wasn't about winning. This was about making sure that, moving forward, the right people were credited. I don't need my name in lights, I said, my voice softening. But I do want my work to be remembered, not as someone else's success, but as my own. And I want to make sure that anyone, especially women, who feel erased, forgotten, or overlooked, have a place to stand, and a chance to be seen. I paused again, the weight of my words settling in the air. Then I smiled, just slightly, because I knew this was the right thing to do. Which is why I'm proud to announce the launch of the Lillian Holt Mentorship Initiative for Underrepresented Women in Biotech, a program that will ensure no one else has to fight alone. The room sat in stunned silence, but I could see the wheels turning. I had already won. Not in a way that would make headlines, but in a way that mattered, to me and to anyone who had been invisible before. I stepped away from the podium, the weight of my decision finally settling into my bones. The applause came, slow at first, but it built. This time, it was for the right reasons. I sat in my lab, the usual hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. But today it felt quieter. The files on my desk were neatly organized, the monitors running simulations, the papers untouched. But instead of focusing on the work I'd immersed myself in for years, my attention was caught by the small, weathered envelope sitting next to my coffee cup. It was old. The edges were worn, the corners slightly curled, as if it had been tucked away in a drawer for years. My name was written in my mother's familiar script, but there was something about it that made my breath catch. I had never seen this letter before. I reached for it slowly, almost hesitant, as if I already knew what it would contain. The familiar tug of something unresolved tightened in my chest. I had spent so many years pretending I didn't need closure, telling myself I was strong enough to move forward without answers. But now, as I held the envelope, I wondered if I was ready for what it held. With a sharp pull, I tore the top of the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. The paper was thick, the ink faded but still legible, and the words were everything I had never heard her say. Marin, I know you won't understand this, and I know I won't be able to explain it properly, but I need you to know. I've always been so afraid of your brilliance. You were never easy to control. You always asked too many questions, pushed too hard. I thought if I kept you small, kept you in the shadows, you'd be safe from all the things I couldn't protect you from. I didn't know how to mother your kind of brilliance. Maybe that was my mistake. I was just too afraid that if I let you shine too brightly, you'd leave me behind. You'd be too much for me to keep up with. The words stung. My mother's voice, finally, in black and white, admitting what had always been so clear between the lines of her dismissals. I didn't know whether to cry or scream, but I kept reading. I'm sorry, Marin. I didn't know how to love you the way you needed. I thought I was protecting you, but now I see that all I did was suffocate you. I hope you can forgive me. But I can't ask you to. I just want you to know that I always loved you. There it was, the confession I'd always wanted, the explanation that had never come. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an excuse. It was a fragile, broken admission of a mother's fear, her failure. I didn't know how to feel. There was no rage, no relief, just an emptiness that settled over me like a fog. I had spent so long wondering why she never understood me, why I had always been the one to sacrifice, the one to shrink. But now, here it was, her own fear, her own shame. I folded the letter carefully and looked at the ashes in the small metal trash can beside me. Without hesitation, I dropped it in. The flames took it in an instant, the paper curling and blackening. When the last of the letter was gone, I leaned back in my chair, feeling the strange finality of the moment. I didn't need the closure. I needed the clarity, and now I had it. I don't need closure, I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. I need clarity, and I have it. And with that, I turned my attention back to the work in front of me. I had finally reclaimed my life. It was mine to live on my terms. The seminar room was small but packed, a cozy space filled with bright-eyed young women in lab coats, their energy buzzing in the air like static. Some of them were taking notes, others were whispering excitedly to each other about the opportunity to meet someone like me. I had been asked to speak at this event, a mentorship initiative that I'd launched under the LEAD Holt Mentorship Initiative, named after my grandmother, of course. This was something I'd promised myself years ago, to create a space for women in biotech, to open doors that had been slammed shut in my face. I stood at the front of the room, adjusting the microphone, watching the room fall into a quiet, expectant silence. A few heads turned to glance at me, and I felt a flicker of nervousness, the kind that came from standing in front of a room full of bright minds, but I quickly pushed it away. These women weren't here to judge me. They were here to be inspired, to be guided. I cleared my throat, feeling the weight of the responsibility that came with this moment. But it wasn't a burden, it was a privilege. Thank you all for being here, I started, my voice calm and steady. I know the road into biotech isn't always easy, especially for women. There's a lot of noise in this field, a lot of voices telling you what you can and can't do. But I'm here to tell you, you don't have to listen to any of it. I let the words hang in the air, watching as they absorbed my message. I spent most of my career in the shadows, hiding behind the work, behind the data. I was the quiet one, the one who was happy to stay in the background. But the truth is, staying hidden won't get you anywhere. You have to be seen. You have to make them see you. A few heads nodded, and I could see some of them shifting in their seats, the spark of understanding lighting up in their eyes. I spent years thinking that I had to shrink myself to fit into the spaces people carved out for me, I continued. That I had to be quiet, stay small, play the game the way they told me to. But what I realized, too late perhaps, is that the game was rigged from the start. And if you want to change the game, if you want to leave your mark on this field, you can't play by their rules. I let that sink in for a moment before moving on. Each of you is here because you have the potential to change everything. You don't need permission. You don't need validation. You need to act like you already have what you want, like it's already yours, and the world will follow. The room was completely still now, every person hanging on my words. I'm not here to tell you it will be easy. It won't be. You will have to fight for every inch, every step forward. But that's the beauty of it. That's what makes the victories, the moments of clarity and truth, so much more powerful. I paused and looked around the room. So, tell me, what's the first thing they told you you couldn't do? The room was quiet for a moment, the question hanging in the air. Then, one by one, they began to speak up, answering with the frustrations they'd carried with them into this room. Publish, one woman said. Lead, said another. Claim patents, came from the back. I smiled. That's the first step right there, I said. Behave like it's already yours, because one day, it will be. The energy in the room shifted, like a weight had been lifted. They were ready to take their place, to claim what was theirs. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just reclaiming my own legacy. I was building new ones. For them. As I finished the seminar, the young women gathered around me, their eyes shining with hope and ambition. A few whispered, "You changed how I see myself." And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just sharing my story. I was passing on the torch. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. For all of us.